Hello, hello, hello. I am back at this house and Paul is too. It was a very, 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 very difficult van vacation. Okay. I don't know, we were gone for 4 days or something. And it was very super uncomfortable, difficult, painful. We fought. He went on my nerves and vice versa. And I had meltdowns. Last night when we came back, I was really glad we made it back safely. Didn't have a horrific van accident. That's always, that treacherous highway that meanders along a river, up and down through rolling hills, past gorges and abysses, past rock walls that are extremely high, where rocks brittle off and fall on cars, and where probably the most accidents ever happened on any highway you can imagine. Oh my goodness. But the blue god watched out for us, as always. So once we finally got home, I did my internet on the other computer and I checked on my messages and I responded to people and I tried to relax, but I didn't feel good. I felt very stressed out. And after I took a shower, I had another really bad nervous breakdown. It was really bad. And then it kind of, it becomes so bad where it becomes worse. I feel terrible, and then I get afraid, and then I have fear of the fear that I can't. Then I feel afraid that I can't heal my mental illness, and that it wouldn't matter how much I try and how many approaches I go through and how much meditation. But that's just a feeling. That's just how it feels in that moment. It feels like it always loops back in, everything. The suffering just loops and loops and loops and loops and loops, and it feels like I can't dissolve that loop. It just keeps on going and going and going and going and going. And I was mad at Paul. I was very upset about his neurosis, but it's his neurosis, So, and I'm not going to help his neurosis or him by me being neurotic, having meltdowns, and getting very angry and snappy and all of that. That just makes his neurosis worse. So that just spirals it out of control. And then I feel and I realize all of this at once. And then I sit down and I just sob for an hour straight, thinking it just loops itself over and over. And then I have to actually allow this in that moment to happen. I have to allow it, because that's very important, to give up the resistance. Resistance is when I want to force things, when I want to force a healing process, then I'm in resistance in that moment. It's true. That is the law of nature, of energy. That's energetic law. My hair stands up like pee-pee long stockings. Yeah, because it is split. I washed my hair last night with shampoo several times. Even though I put a little bit of my cream into my hair, it still stands up like that. My natural hair is light blue, as you can see. It's light blue. Okay. At least I still have full hair and all of that. I have very fine hair, but it's full hair. And it is wavy, naturally wavy. Okay. And it is originally naturally dark brown, like my eyebrows, like the hair under my armpits, which I shaved. But yeah, so. But the head hair became light blue, like Sam Wagner's. We get old, baby. We get old. You're 56, like me, and up. We're getting old. So, but anyway, the way that looks. So, but I have some old videos where my hair, when my hair was longer, like not very long, but to here, dark brown. I used to put henna in it. It was always very wavy, and that's why it stands up like this. Because if it was straight hair, it would never stand up like that. So sometimes if I can train it a little bit with water and with some oils and stuff like this, and then the oil makes it heavier, and so it will cover my ear. After I shampoo it, then there's no oil in it, and then it stands up. But it doesn't matter. It is what it is. Okay, just try to make the best out of everything. I try to make the best out of going to that audiologist, and this whole vacation, in quotation marks, I don't know what I should call it. Boot camp journey. Yeah, maybe I should call it that. Okay. It was some kind of survival training exercise for 4 days, straight out of some kind of militia survival training season. It happens about twice a year. This year it will be probably 3 times, because we're going to go again in end of October. Even though on the last trip yesterday I said I am never going on another van vacation with you. Never. That's it. Finished. You can go to the next audiologist appointment on your own. I'm staying here. I'm not going. Okay. I don't want to experience that again. Super uncomfortable. And we wanted to go get a dog, wanted to adopt a dog. And then what happened before that is mysteriously, how, I don't know, but one of the tires was losing air. Okay, he had me look, and yeah, there was a nail in it. And I had this I remember that night before there, I felt it sounded like someone pounded a nail in the tire. Someone snuck up, pounded a nail in it, and then there was this bubbly hissing sound of air, like farting out or something. That's this kind of sound. I also felt like I heard noises, but I dismissed it. I thought there were animals. But then I put all these puzzle pieces together, and that, let's put it this way, all the puzzle pieces the next day and so on raised some questions. I'm not gonna judge on it. I'm not gonna say with determination it was this person or that person. It could have also been just driving over a nail. That happens too sometimes. But I don't know. All of these puzzle pieces just raise a question, and so I think, what if it is someone who wants to sabotage? So there are a lot of people that want to sabotage. They've closed all the roads off there. We had to do a big detour because of the arsonists, and there's a big fire raging in that region. Okay. And they had to route people around it, so some of those highways were too dangerous to drive on. And then we were not that far away from the dog we wanted to look at. After Paul had changed the tire and everything, that was a big job. I'm making video. Wanted to see the dog, and then it was super hot also, and then I said, let's go back home. Okay, so I need to get a European Basset Hound, and I feel really bad about that. I would much rather rescue a dog, adopt a dog. But not knowing what's going to happen with the next animal shelter, how they're going to react, how they're going to interrogate us and hold on to the dogs. I really don't want to go through this again, what they did with the other animal shelter. That was very discouraging. That was very, very, very painful for me. I don't like to get into a situation where my Medusa comes up, where severe anger comes up. I don't want to provoke a situation like this, Don't want to bring it on. If things happen in life, then we deal with it. But we become kind of cautious. We go through some shit and we see, oh, there is another situation that could end up in the same way. We become a little more cautious. So what if it happens again? And then I will feel this terrible hatred again. And I don't want to feel hatred. I don't like feeling hatred. It doesn't feel good to feel hatred, for sure. I like to feel love. That is that's the paradise. Love, feeling love, being in a mental state of love. That's paradise. That's wonderful. It does not feel good to feel hatred for anyone. But it's very challenging and very difficult when I'm in a situation where I'm being treated with so much coldness and callousness and lies and pretense the way they treated us at that other animal shelter. And so that applies to all situations in life, when we experience things that were very, very, very painful emotionally or physically. Then we become more careful the next time when we see a similar situation that we could go into a similar situation. So we decide before we get into that situation, it's better not to get into that situation again. And the dog is not exactly the dog who I want to adopt. Okay, so I love the dog. The dog looks awesome. Okay, but that's not exactly the dog I want to adopt. And like I said before, I had this dream about 2 European Basset Hounds on a construction site. Someone brought them there just before we got there, and it was nighttime, and we had 2 chest harnesses in the van, and we lured the dogs in with biscuits, which we have in the van, all of that, And then we put the chest harnesses on and we took them with us. Okay, so and that's what I want to experience. I want to be there. I want to rescue 2 European Basset Hounds, 1 year old, brother and sister. Okay. And that's my wish for the infinite cosmos. And right now we don't really have the ideal situation for adopting a dog, because we're going to be selling the houses. We're going to be moving inland. Okay. So we're going to get a large property. We're going to put storage containers on it, and then eventually we will have the really large tunnel greenhouses installed, so that we each have a tunnel greenhouse. But I also want to talk about the story of Kaspar Hauser, which I already started talking about in my other video on my channel, Nikki Loves Dogs. When we were at the audiologist's office, I started talking about Kaspar Hauser. And I got to explain what happened. So he was replaced as an infant after birth. He was replaced with a sickly infant from someone else who worked there for the royal court and who was actually ordered by the royal court to take that Kaspar baby, the real heir to the throne of Baden, take him away and murder. But the man could not do it. He loved the baby and he thought, I want to give him a chance. I'll just replace them. I put my own there. He put his own baby there, who was very sick, and I don't know what the baby had. Probably tuberculosis. Around 1800, they didn't have much of cures for these things. People died from those kind of respiratory illnesses all the time. And so he just put that baby there. The baby died not long after that. Very horrific. And he took Kaspar in as his own child. And then, because I did a lot of research on that case, so I read all kinds of things, including a very eye-opening novel that was written about this case. A very good person wrote a novel about him in German, German writer. Also very famous book. This book was about what actually happened, raising the questions of putting all the dots together on this case. Kaspar Hauser was the rightly heir to the throne of Baden. But someone else who had manipulated their way into this, which was actually a woman who manipulated her way into this, I think she was actually the mistress. Those royal people, they always had their official mistresses. She was the first mistress of the King of Baden. I think that's how it was. And she was behind all of those murders, because she wanted her son, probably her son that she had with the King of Baden, but that was not the actual next to kin. But people are selfish and ego-driven and all of this. So she wanted her genes to continue with that lineage of being the king of that dynasty. So she had all of these other male heirs exterminated, and Kaspar was supposed to be exterminated. But the person who took him in, he had him, I don't know, maybe for 2 or 3 years. He had him there, but he started to look more and more like his mother, Stephanie de Beauharnais, who was the queen, basically, the wife of the king. And so that person who adopted Kaspar got scared. He thought that this would all come to the surface, then that will also have implications for his life, and he might even be executed by the people who wanted him to actually murder that baby. Back then, they didn't even have human rights laws, or they didn't have any rights laws at all. And even though they put humans over animals, I don't put humans over animals. So for me, all living beings have an equal ethical right to being treated well. I just wanted to clear this up. It's very important that I don't get misunderstood. Humans always put humans on a pedestal, but even they don't have, particularly around 1800, they didn't have human rights. So they were still executing people with the accusation of being a witch. So those were still in the Dark Ages. And what they did in royal courts, the kind of stuff that was going on there, is just absolutely abhorrent. So then that man who was working for the royal court, who adopted Kaspar, he took him when he was like 2 or 3 years old. Or maybe he was just 1 year old, or maybe just 1.5, or something like this. But he must have introduced him to Stephanie de Beauharnais, because later on, so the stuff, he had memory flashbacks, which is very, very interesting, I think. Very interesting story. He must have introduced him to her because she was probably in a huge depression and grief over her baby dying. So just to make her feel better and to actually let her hold her own son, but not telling her that this is her actual. He told her that's his son. But to comfort her, to give her some good energy in that moment. So one has to always understand that the people who work for royal courts, no matter whether they were callous or compassionate, they were tethered to the royal court structure. They couldn't really get out. They had to watch out for their own family, for their own lives. They had to make ethical decisions on this. I can't just blow the whistle. They will retaliate, not just on me, but on my children. It's kind of like a mafia structure, basically. And that's how the mafia functions also, and that is how the corporate agenda functions, and that is how a lot of countries function, where they have no ethical laws at all. So he took that child and he brought that child to a dungeon. I don't know if it was the dungeon of that same castle, but he was hiding him in a dungeon. And then he got scared. He thought, what if someone finds him there? And he brought him to a dungeon in another community, in Nuremberg, Germany. And that's where he was going to be staying for several years, in a dungeon, in a very small, confined space where he could not even stretch out, which caused a muscular dystrophy and deformation of his legs. His legs were like bow-legged and very short because of that situation, growing up in that dungeon. And he was given an old little wooden horse toy, and he learned the word horse. He already had learned the word horse in the castle, I'm sure. So he knew that was a horse. He had learned a few things only. It was just in the beginning where he was starting to learn to speak, actually, maybe at one year old or something. But one can memorize. One can, even at 1 year old, the brain collects all that data around you. And so, and his captivator, his hostage keeper, he thought that child would not memorize and would not remember any of these circumstances in the court. He would just, he wouldn't talk to him, so that way he would never learn how to speak. And he kept him there until he was 16 or 17 years old. I think 17. And then he kept bringing him only bread and water, and he kept him in this dark place. He never saw the sunlight or only glimpses of sunshine. And very cruel, very horrific. Very, very horrific. And so he thought that would just make him retarded, but it didn't. Not in the case of Kaspar Hauser. Being a child of the King of Baden and Stephanie de Beauharnais, those were highly educated, intellectual, scholarly people, very intelligent people, with a big brain, and he had that too, and highly sensitive. He learned how to draw amazingly well, became a real great artist and poet and writer and very, very nuanced and very observant of everything. He would have been a great psychologist too. So at age 17, that hostage keeper, he decided to release him on the marketplace of Nuremberg, Germany. And he handed him a letter that he wrote. And in that letter it says, I want to become a horseman rider like my father was. And that was a misleading trail that was supposed to mislead people to think that he was some random horseback rider's son. But things didn't add up. All of this was extremely mysterious to the people there that interrogated him. He couldn't talk, and he was sensitive. He would touch a flame and scream. He never learned to stay away from flames, from a candle. The sunlight was too much for him. He could not be outside at all. He was blinded by the sunlight. And he could not handle the smell of meat. That's another very interesting thing that comes into there. We are naturally not even adapted to that. Our natural biology tells us meat is murder, It literally is. Okay. And when he smelled meat, he had a horrified look on his face. He didn't like it at all. So he could not. And later on, they kind of forced him to eat meat. The different people that had him in their custody, different teachers and so on. And then when he was somewhere in his 20s, that's when he was murdered, because the word got out to the House of Baden, the people that wanted to take over the House of Baden. The word got out that this is apparently that hair, and he was switched at birth, and who knows what happened to the guy who captured him. But they found out they had sent a spy over, some English royal man, who was sent out to make friends with him and to report back to them what he remembers. And he always reported everything back, obviously. And then that Kaspar Hauser shot up in fame because everyone was interested in this case. And it was became public, that information. And so the House of Baden, the people that wanted to take over the throne, they got very, very afraid. Because if this all blows up, then they think they would be executed. If the hair of Baden was as callous and psychopathic as they are, but they didn't know. They assume he would be, right? But let's say this had come to the surface and he would not have been murdered, he would not have been assassinated, and he would have taken on the throne of Baden at somewhere in his early 20s, and he would have seen the entire thing in front of him, what happened and who was the perpetrator, who were all the perpetrators. He was such a kind-hearted man, he would not even have executed them, but they didn't know. They always assumed, they assumed things. He probably would have had a last word and said, no, let's have mercy on them or whatever. But let's keep an eye on them. Let's make sure that they don't do any more harm to anyone. That's what I think about Kaspar. Highly, highly sensitive, compassionate being. Later on, he reincarnated into Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and then into Kaspar the dog. So. But I don't want to get into the details of this now. I just want to finish now the story with Kaspar, Hauser, the young man, growing up with memory flashbacks as he was in custody of teachers, and he had dreams about the House of Baden. He was able to draw the emblem of the House of Baden, and all of this leaked out to the surface, and that, of course, that scared those perpetrators really badly. And yeah, so at some point they tried to assassinate him twice before the murder, and then the third time they got him. They shot him into the side, or stabbed him. I think they stabbed him. Someone came over and stabbed him. And he left a mysterious letter with him that was written backwards, just to diffuse the situation more and more, just to make it more mysterious, to lead astray from the actual perpetrator. But he was able to walk back home with that stab wound. And then the police came. They wanted to find the perpetrator. They had him walk with that. He was doing very well with that stab wound for like 3 days, and on the third day they wanted him to show where that was, where he was stabbed. And by the time he got to that place and showed him where it was, he collapsed and died. Absolutely horrific story, infinitely sad. So, but I wanted to talk about this. I thought that's important. Okay, you guys take care. Bye-bye.